and welcome to JuliaCon the podcast, episode 4, entitled... No, 5? Is this 5?
No, this is 4.
This is 4. Episode 4, titled, Where's Huda? I'm your host, Nathan Daly, and I'm joined with my other host.
Hi, I'm Keno.
And we're so happy to have you. Sorry that I couldn't make it yesterday, although I'm told I was doppelganged by Keno's nice impression of me. And we're very sorry to miss Huda today, but she gave a really great workshop earlier. And I think she was sort of all zoomed out after that and had some other meetings she had to attend to as well. So
understandable. Workshops are
understandable.
Very, very exhausting endeavor.
I watched I watched the first half of it, but then I had to go, and it was really cool to see all the different examples in there. I definitely learned a couple of things and had fun. Yeah, we have today 3 great guests for our interviews. We're going to be interviewing Jeff Bezanson, Stefan Karpinski, and Tim Holy, who have all been involved in Julia's development for a long time, since basically the beginning. Obviously, Jeff and Stefan since the beginning, and I think Tim basically since the beginning too, from what I understand. We're going to be talking to them about their experience at Julia and all of that. And but first, we also have a couple guests, for maybe one guest for a quick say hello segment. And as always, if you are listening to this right now live and want to come on and do the say hello, just say so in the YouTube chat or in the Slack chat, and we'll send you a link and you can join in too. And then we'll have a couple other quick notes about social events at JuliaCon, even though we're all online. So I think let's start real quick with our say hello segment. Fonz, do you want to come off? Yeah, hi, thanks.
Hey.
Thanks for coming on to our say hello. You're our very first say hello guest.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So why don't you say hello?
Hello. So my name is Fonz, or Fonzie, and this is my very first JuliaCon. So I'm excited.
We're happy to have you. That's great.
Yeah.
Where do you live?
I live in Berlin right now. Yeah, but I've been, so it's not just my first JuliaCon, it's my first ever conference.
Oh, cool.
And I'm giving a talk on Friday, or I gave it 2 weeks ago, I guess, to my camera. But I'm really happy to have these kind of semi-social things in here, because, you know, GitHub Issues is nice, but I prefer just meeting people and talking things over. So yeah, looking forward to meeting people.
Yeah, that's great. We're glad to get to meet you today. I'm looking forward to your talk too. It's on Pluto, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing
Yeah,
it.
Fonz, do you want to do a quick 20-second Pluto.jl ad for the audience? It's
Right.
a fantastic
So
project.
say you're using Jupyter and you redefine a variable, but the old one still lives around, and boom, Pluto fixes that problem. That's like 5 seconds. But the main thing is, with my friend Nick, who's also giving the talk, we're giving it together, we made a new notebook system kind of from scratch, and it's based on these new ideas from JavaScript notebooks, which is from Observable. And the idea is that the notebook system should look at your syntax, or look at the code you write, and see which variables you're defining and deleting and re-referencing. And that makes everything a lot more simple and a lot more fast. And that's really cool. And so it's early days. We get a lot of nice feedback. But like I said, I'd love to meet more people.
Yeah, that's great. I think it seems like a really cool project. We're excited to hear more about your talk. Personally, I'm super excited to talk to you about it as well, because I think your talk and my talk overlap a whole bunch. Like we're both making the same argument for the same ideas.
Yeah,
so I'd love to collaborate and see if there's any.
Yeah, looking forward. Yeah,
awesome.
I think so. So I'm happy to have found my niche, which is education and getting as many people from level 1 to level 2 in programming. And I think, you know, Julia could actually be the right language for this. And I think in a good, safe environment, this could work very well. Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed. That's awesome. Okay. Well, thank you for coming on.
Right.
We're going to let you go. And thank you so much for being our model example. Everybody else, please do like Fonzie and come on.
All right. I'd love to meet you all.
Do.
Ciao.
Bye-bye. Awesome. Thank you so much. So, okay, we're on the note of getting to meet everybody. I want to start by one of the feedback form. Okay, first of all, remember there's a feedback form down below where you can tell us what you want to hear, and you can also sign up to do this come say hi segment. So fill out the feedback form, give us your email address if you want to be on this show, and we'll send you the Zoom link. And also tell us who else you want to see interviewed, or although I think we have all the interviews scheduled. Tell us just what else you want to hear and what other topics.
I mean, I think if people want to,
we can always add more interviews.
We can do a double-length interview session if necessary.
That's true.
I don't think we should restrict the people and who they want to hear from.
We want to hear what the people want to hear, so fill out the form. But yeah, on that note, one piece of feedback that we got was someone asked us to cover what are all the kinds of different social events that you can have at JuliaCon, given that it's online. So I just wanted to go through those real quick. The first, I guess, is this podcast. You can come on the podcast or watch the podcast, or you can join the live stream, which is happening right now, and comment on the recording of the podcast. There is the main one, which is the Discord channel. So you should be getting an email about this. Should be coming in your emails every day. But if you're watching this but haven't actually registered for JuliaCon through the JuliaCon.org website, go do that, because then you'll be getting a link to join our Discord server, where there's both text and voice chat going on during the talk sessions, so you can ask questions and get your questions answered. All the official question answering is happening on Discord, so join the Discord. Then there is a Minecraft server, which we don't have any information about yet, but we should at some point maybe cover. But there's a Minecraft server, I'm told, and Minecraft's pretty cool. And then the last one is this gather.town website, which I think is a really nice addition to social time here. And if you haven't been there, it's really nice. The link is in the email, and you can go and meet everyone. And I think it sounds like we're having scheduled social time around, I think it's like 17:30 UTC. I don't know. 7:30 UTC? I don't know. It's like 1:30 Eastern
I think it's
time.
on the schedule now. So
it's
check
on the
schedule as always.
Yes.
I think we have vowed not to do scheduling announcements.
Yes, we are not an agenda. I apologize. But go to gather.town, come to the socials. It's really nice. And I wanted to take this moment to issue a formal apology on behalf of everybody here, especially not me, even though it was my mistake. That today I went and did live wandering interviews on gather.town, and it was so much fun. The good news is I had a really nice time, and I think hopefully other people had a really nice time. The bad news is I didn't actually record my computer's audio. So I have a whole bunch of recordings of me saying, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you. Tell me about yourself." And then silence for 10 seconds. So I'm really sorry about that. But I just wanted to share really quickly what it looked like, these nice videos of interviewing everybody. So if you haven't seen gather.town, the link is in your email, and you can come and walk around here, and you can get interviewed, and hopefully not in silence. So we're going to come back tomorrow, and we're going to do the same thing, but we're actually going to have audio. Oops, sorry. We're actually going to have audio. So here, like, I talked to all these really nice people, but unfortunately, we don't get to hear about it. So anyway, thanks so much for everybody who I got to interview, and hopefully I'll see you again tomorrow, and we can try again. And with that, I think we can move to the interviews.
Let's do it. All right. Okay. So Jeff, Stefan, Tim, why don't you reveal yourselves?
Hi, everyone.
All right.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, this seems to be working. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was showing up, which they seem to be. So yeah, we figured we'd just do this very free form. I know all three of you have been at JuliaCon since the very first one. And I know we always talk about, obviously I talk to Jeff and Stefan a lot since we all work together, but we always talk about how JuliaCon is the time and place to go see Tim Holy. So I'm very excited.
Tim HolyCon.
It's Tim HolyCon, that's right.
Hardly.
So,
that's I see it as a very long named conference with all the people that I want to see.
Yeah. But it certainly getting to see you once a year at JuliaCon is always a highlight for us. So I'm very glad that you agreed to be on the podcast, and I'm very glad to have you here along with Jeff and Stefan, since I think we can have some good discussion around the history of JuliaCon and the history of Julia over these past, almost 10 years that all of us have been involved in this. So I figured actually, I think it might make sense to get started with Tim, how you got into the language, since Jeff and Stefan, how they got into it is obvious. They started it, but maybe tell the people how you got into it.
Okay, yeah. So I think this was in I guess March of 2012, and I'm a neuroscientist. I run a wet lab. We do mouse surgeries and imaging and all this kind of stuff. But I've been programming for a long time, and I had long since assumed the role of being the main sort of tackling the difficult programming challenges for my lab. And I was using this amazing brand new, not quite brand new at that point, but still felt fairly new, cutting edge tool, Subversion. And I had started taking an inventory. I'd settled on a habit of once a year looking back at my commit history and just sort of analyzing the patterns and trying to sort of figure out whether there was anything about workflow that should change. And I was using a different language, and in March of 2012, when I did my inventory, I realized when I looked back that I had written 70 some functions that were really written in C, but were designed to be callable from this other language. And this was very distressing because invariably the C code was about 5 lines of actual algorithm, and then it was 500 lines of glue code to repackage all of the data into the appropriate form and then package it back out again. And 70 of those was probably a big chunk of my entire year, basically, because some of these were fairly complicated. And so I began to question whether the language I was using was actually working for me or against me, basically. And so I remember I did a fateful search. I knew what I wanted. I wanted the performance of C, but by that point I had grown very addicted to the kind of the interactive command line prompt. So I did a search for interactive command prompt for C or C++. And just by happenstance, the second thing that came up was the famous blog post that Stefan and others put together on why we created Julia. This was just, I think, a month after the blog had appeared. I'm not in the habit normally, or hadn't been in the habit ever, of checking computer blog posts, but I came across this thing and it just sounded like a dream come true. And so I said, well, I'm going to check this out. And so I checked it out. And I think the first thing I wrote in it was a heap sort algorithm, because I think that was one of the things that I'd needed in some of my C glue code stuff. And I was delighted to see that it just worked. And so I was immediately sold. And I think I reported a couple of bugs. And I remember, I think, Jeff, you fixed a bug of mine in about 30 minutes one time. And
that does happen.
Yes, it absolutely does. And as I've told many people, I actually had at one point an entry on my calendar to re-report the same bug to the folks behind the language I used to use, and on an annual basis, and was still waiting for the fix. So when Jeff fixed something in 30 minutes, I'm like, okay, this is really good. So
yeah, I love doing that, but it usually takes longer these days, unfortunately.
Yes, the bugs are rarer and harder. So yes, exactly. So anyway, so after I think I reported a couple, and then I got to a bug that Jeff didn't fix for me in half an hour. And at a certain point, I said, well, I can open up an editor. This is open source. Let me see if I can take a peek at this. And eventually, I fixed that bug and I contributed the fix, and I learned this horrifying much more complicated tool, Git, and pretty soon was off to the races and actually contributing to the language rather than just, which was my original intention, was just to be a user of the language, basically.
And the rest is history.
Yes, so it seems. So yep. So anyway,
speaking of that initial blog post, I was hoping that Jeff and Stefan could just recount for us sort of their reaction to seeing, I guess, the reactions to that blog post, because it got a huge response on the internet, and I think was sort of one of, if not the primary, turning point that the Julia project has seen. So what was that like?
Yeah, it was exciting. I mean, there was a full day, probably more than a full day of answering posts, and yeah.
Well, I mean, the first thing about it was that it was a total surprise because Viral had posted it on Reddit, and then it got to Hacker News without him telling us. So I was actually still editing the blog post in theory when suddenly 35,000 people were looking at it.
Yeah, we dug up those emails. I think 2 years ago. Yeah,
we did, and there's a very clear back and forth where I'm like, hey man, what gives? Why did you post this already? You can't argue with success. It worked, so who cares? I think actually the only thing I would have edited that Matt Bauman recently submitted a change to it because he was like, this is so confusing. Was that towards the end of the post it said, now it's time for a 1.0 release, which was like 5 years prior to 1.0. 0.1.
It was just a transposition. We meant 0.1.
Yeah,
exactly.
So he now edited that and put a footnote that this originally said 1.0, but it's less confusing now. That's the only thing I would have edited anyway. So
I think we've been promising. Well, we have been promising 1.0 for a very long time.
Well, 0 and 1, what's the difference?
Right.
It's the right order of magnitude, yeah.
If we just counted in binary in our releases, then we would have been there about a year afterwards, right? So.
Yeah. Sure.
So.
How long into the project was that blog post? Like, how long had you been working on it before that post?
About 3 years, I think.
Yeah, we started working on it. I think the very first commit was August 2009, but it was the initial empty commit. So I think the first real commits were by Jeff in like October.
Yeah, so it was about 2.5 years, I guess.
We have this like incredibly unfair advantage in terms of number of commits to the repo because, back then it was just like, write some comments or like write some code that doesn't even work and just like commit it and push it. Like you can do that.
Everything straight to master. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Whereas now everybody has to like, make PRs and answer questions about their changes and like pass tests and stuff.
And then you squash it all down to a single commit at the end anyway.
Right.
Exactly.
That's the worst thing about it. It's like 2 weeks of work, just like one commit.
Yeah.
In those early days, were you did you have any users? Were you demoing this with people who you thought like might be productive, or were you the only users like for your own work at Etsy or in the other context?
Oh, I mean, I definitely was not allowed to. I was working at Etsy. I think that's what you were asking. Definitely was not allowed to use Julia at Etsy.
Okay, so you weren't. It wasn't even
allowed to use MATLAB at Etsy.
Okay,
I was very skeptical about that. But I needed to do singular value decompositions and wasn't about to do it in PHP, although that was suggested. I laughed for like 15 straight minutes when someone suggested I do singular value decomposition in PHP. We were pretty much our own users.
Random victims and have them try to use the language.
Yeah, Alan was the first user really, and then the first non-developer user, and he was trying things out super early. And then he, I think it was 2011 when he decided it was fair game to inflict it on his computing students.
Yeah.
That's when we found Jameson. So that worked out well for at least one person. Everyone else was cursing, but David liked it.
Yeah, I was amazed at how mature the distributed computing framework was for a new language because of the, presumably it was because of Alan's course, basically, right? So.
Yeah, that was one of the first things we did. Yeah.
Ironically, I think it might have worked better in like 0.1 and 0.2 than it does these days. Like,
That's rough.
there was
harsh.
just a lot of nice bells and whistles it had. It had like automatic code loading, which, now that code loading just works completely differently, is kind of broken. And the language was just a lot simpler. So, I mean, I think it's partly just because you could do fewer things. So obviously all the things that are broken now, you just couldn't do. But I think as a result, it worked in more percentage of the cases that people were actually writing Julia.
You're looking back with rose-colored glasses,
Maybe I am.
You've also got more discerning. I think that's your discernment has gone up, I think, as well.
I definitely remember several iterations of thinking, wow, this is a lot smoother than it used to be. So yeah, I have a hard
in distributed time. In particular?
Not particularly distributed, just sort of over and over again, the sort of user experience, getting major bumps worked out of it. So
well, I mean, Julia is definitely much better. I was just thinking about distributed.
Sure, just the distributed. Yeah.
But I may certainly be misremembering.
The glass half empty version of that is when you look back and you're like, oh, how bad was this? 0.1 is an interesting experience to go back and try now. It's not terrible. It's, kind of recognizable, but it's really... Yeah,
the thing that is most jarring is all the bold REPL stuff, which, I completely did not want to get rid of. I remember saying, I'm not sure this non-bold REPL stuff is all that great an idea. It doesn't look that good. But now you go back and it's like, oh my God, what were we thinking?
Why is it yelling at me? I found some code from, this is from when I was working at Akamai, so that was like 2000. And I used to write Perl code double-spaced for some reason, which is the most horrifying thing to find. And looking back at these files, I'm like, why is it double-spaced? That makes it impossible. You can't see anything. Your program, you can fit 5 lines of code on one page, on one screen full. What was, somehow I thought it was much more readable that way back then.
But each line is only one character, so it's okay.
Yeah. All right, so I think we should talk a little bit about the history of JuliaCon also, since this podcast will go live the first day of talks of JuliaCon 2020. So I mentioned on the I think it was yesterday's episode that Tim Holy, the two of us, we sat down at the hackathon at the first ever JuliaCon in Chicago to put generated functions into the language.
Yep, exactly. Hackathons have always been one of my favorites. So yeah.
Is this in the regrets column or the?
Exactly.
I'm not sure. I mean, generated functions are just one of those things that you think is simple, but it just causes all kinds of problems because you suddenly start running code in the compiler.
The way I see it is it's one of those amazing features for getting things to work fast enough to be useful that you then kind of everything that is you're forced to use a generated function for is on your to-do list of improving the compiler to the point where you don't need generated functions anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's a good way to see it.
It's a great way to figure out oh, that's a feature we need because we couldn't do it with anything besides generated functions.
Yeah. It's basically an escape hatch for wanting your own custom compiler. Though it turns out you actually want more kinds of escape hatches to do it during inference also. But.
Yeah, and I think it let us implement some important stuff. I mean, a lot of the early there's still a little vestige of this. It just hasn't yet been ripped out. But the early sort of new generation of array functionality was very heavily dependent upon the generated functions because at that point the tuples were not as good as they are now, and we couldn't write it using just plain tuple manipulations. And so it was really critical in those sort of early days when Matt Bauman and I and others were sort of trying to do the kind of reboot of that. But yeah, now you can do so many things with just tuple manipulations that I spend some fraction of my time trying to dissuade people from using generated functions to solve their problems. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Speaking of tuples, I remember quite clearly a month where Jeff and I sat down to just disambiguate everything that was a tuple type, and a simple vector.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Those used to all be the same, and then we planned. So immutables got added in Julia 0.2, I believe, maybe 0.3. Does anybody remember?
0.2 sounds familiar.
I thought it was 0.2. So we had immutables. Oh, we didn't have immutables in 0.1, but we had them in 0.2. And I think ever since we added immutables, we thought, okay, these tuples should just be unnamed immutables.
Yeah, the new immutable types were immediately more efficient than tuples.
Correct.
It's like, oh, oops.
Whoops. Right, because at that point, tuples didn't get specialized layout. Tuples were basically what simple vector is now, which is just pointers to boxed objects. So they were quite inefficient. So we planned to do this change for a long time, but like everything in the language was basically a tuple, right? Like signatures were tuples of types, and at that point, the type system still had the type of a tuple be the tuple of its types. So we were also changing that at the same time. So I remember it must have been the summer, or maybe shortly before, where I went over to MIT and Jeff and I sat down and said, okay, let's just go through the entire language and just change every single instance.
I remember that well. It was just several hours hackathon, sitting there going through everything. Yeah, I remember.
Oh, I was starting to wonder what the tie back to JuliaCon was here. I was like, I feel like we've just fallen into compiler hackers talking about.
Yeah, we'll get back to it. So the thing,
every conversation.
The thing that I actually wanted to bring up is that that JuliaCon in Chicago was the first ever JuliaCon, but we did actually have a meeting at MIT in IAP 2013, I think, where we brought a bunch of people together. I think Tim wasn't there for that. But that's
there was
sort of
one JuliaCon I missed, so yep.
And this was actually pre-JuliaCon. You guys remember the Jeff Stefan? You guys will remember.
Yes,
this, right?
we just invited a few people to MIT, and it was very informal.
Very informal, sort of a proto-JuliaCon. But the videos for that are actually still online if people want to see it. So
really, are they on the Julia channel?
I think so. Yeah.
Who was there? Was Doug Bates there? Am I remembering that right?
Doug Bates spoke. I'm pretty sure Steve Johnson spoke.
Yeah, Doug Bates was there. Yeah.
I think that was the event where Steve Johnson told us that Julia was doomed and would never amount to anything.
It wasn't the first time he said it, nor the last.
No, I think it was the first time he said it to us. I think that was like when we met him in person. Like I don't think he contributed at that point yet. I think that was sort of the like, oh, this is Steve Johnson. Was that IAP meeting? So I sort of consider that the proto JuliaCon. So I thought I'd bring it up as a fun event a fun footnote in the history of JuliaCon.
One of the hackathons that I fondly remember is one that happened, I think it was at one of the MIT conferences. I think it was we used, several of us used that hackathon as essentially, instead of actually doing the hacking, it was just essentially whiteboarding. And I remember that one very fondly. I don't remember everything that we covered, but I think we actually designed the new iteration protocol after the start next done one at that one.
Yes.
And I think the syntax for traits that became trader, which we've moved on from now, but that was also hammered out, I think, during those whiteboarding sessions. And there were several other issues too. I just don't remember them all at this point. So.
Yeah, I had forgotten about that, but now that you mention it, I very clearly remember standing in the hallway at CSAIL because we didn't want to disturb the hackathon, and the student street is what it's called data center at MIT. There's just sort of a passageway, I guess, on the ground floor. And they just have random whiteboards set up. And I remember us just all like standing around those, like you and Jeff, and I think Stefan, you were probably there as well. So standing around them, and then sort of 2 layers of circles. 2 layers of circles around us, just watching us.
We've lost Keno.
No, Viral was just sending a note on the live stream. He was correcting me that it was not the first time Steve Johnson had said that. I think it might have been the first time he said it to me.
I know it wasn't. He said that very early and often.
Yeah.
I was also going to say from the YouTube live stream, Nick suggests that this is a brainstormathon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's sort of like a brainstormathon. Exactly right. Yep.
So the iteration protocol. So I remember standing in front of the whiteboard, and we were designing, and people were sort of looking on. And
I feel like we may need another brainstormathon at some point. Because it weighs on me occasionally. Like, what are we going to do? When are we going to do 2.0? And what are we going to do for it? I feel like we need some big ideas.
Yes, good dreaming up stuff that's way too hard to implement session.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like the iteration protocol.
Come up with some crazy stuff that seems impossible, and you sort of dial it back and figure out like what portions of this can we actually do. And then you go for it. But we need to do one of those at some point. Maybe next year since we'll be in person, and I guess we're doing Portugal. Yeah. Portugal gets the like 1 year delay.
Yeah,
I think that's the plan, but I do not know.
We have an official statement on this podcast not to make any scheduling statements.
Okay,
because we do not know. But yeah, that's what I've heard as well, Stefan. Yeah.
Okay.
Being listening again.
But don't listen to us, because we're just random people who talk about Julia.
I heard it here first, but not authoritatively.
Yeah.
This is the Julia rumor mill.
Yes, exactly.
The hackathon of JuliaCon is always one of the, and I think it's one of the things that we're sort of missing this year. I mean, we're trying to replicate a lot of it, and obviously we do have the talks, but just like walking around the room and seeing, okay, what are people working on, and finding, especially if you're a new person, finding the group that's working on something that's interesting, and just starting to hack with them.
Last year, I spent most of my hackathon time working on the Julia formatter, which has really taken off.
It's really nice.
I still kind of want to force it on base Julia, but periodically I try running it on the code and see like how annoying to Jeff would it be to change this. And then I kind of I'm like, well, okay, we're getting there. It's probably like he might hate me for a while, but let's give it a little longer. But Dom Luna has done amazing work on that, and I think a lot of packages have started using it in earnest, which is great to see. I know. John Miles White has sort of expressed that he thinks one of the things that's absent from the Julia ecosystem that other ecosystems have, like Go, has got this standard format that everybody uses. I'm not sure I want to go that far. I don't know. There's something very draconian feeling about forcing one style on everybody, but I kind of like the fact that you can just auto. Right. Yeah. You can have any color you want as long as it's black. The old Henry Ford saying. Yeah, that was a good thing to spend the hackathon on. Of course, there was the 1.0 hackathon where everybody was just trying to fix packages, which was wildly effective. I mean, we got like 80 packages fixed in one day with a room full of people working on it. But it was a bit.
And I think the momentum continued for several days thereafter. I think we were up to like 300 packages within about 3 or 4 days, basically. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how much you can get done if you have a truly parallelizable task and you get a bunch of people motivated to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the things people don't realize about programming languages in general. They sort of see this like daunting wall of functionality and libraries in place, in Python or R or whatever. And what they don't realize is that designing a language is hard to parallelize. You can't make that very good. It kind of has to be a small team of people working closely together. But, implementing 1,000 packages, like, well, okay, do you have 1,000 good grad students who are procrastinating on their PhD thesis? Like, you could have those done in no time. Like, it's very, very straightforward. Which we've benefited from. I feel like the project is like 90% driven by, academic procrastination.
Procrastinating grad students.
Yeah.
Well,
all doing it in the service of the research.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Well, now we have an established tradition of scrambling to work on a release during JuliaCon. That's one of the activities.
I remember, Jeff, when Kano and I were working on generated functions, you were busily trying to get whatever it was, a long overdue release out the door, whichever one that was, 0.4 maybe? I don't remember now. 0.3? Anyway.
Perhaps, yeah. And now we're doing it now too, but it's not nearly as frantic as 1.0, of course.
Yes,
not even close.
Yes,
this
that was
a very relaxed release from my perspective. Do you guys feel that way as well?
Yeah, we've kind of taken our time. But it's still on schedule.
Yeah, I mean, the thing we've settled on is the only thing that's really scheduled is the feature freeze.
Yeah.
So that sort of takes the pressure out of it because you're like, okay, well, the branch is now that we can control, and then however long it takes to stabilize the branch to a release, that's how long it takes. And that seems to work really well. Keeps the pace regular, but doesn't make it not stressful.
And I think almost every time a release comes out, just a little bit before the next release branch happens.
Mm-hmm.
So there's kind of a rhythm.
Yeah. Well, and
I think the time-based switch was really important. It's it's given us the ability to say no. I think to just wanting to have something in the release.
Well, we couldn't really do time-based before 1.0 very well.
No, we couldn't.
Because we needed to get features done, and they were breaking every time. So you want to batch them up into as few sets of breaking changes as you can.
Yeah.
Not having breaking releases has been, it's a godsend for everybody.
Yeah.
Really.
Agreed.
Jeff, do you have a favorite JuliaCon memory?
I like the boats.
The boats.
The boats.
I like the boat.
Great.
The first one had a boat, and last year we had a boat.
Yep.
That was it, right? Only 2 boats.
But they were nice boats. I mean, I didn't go to the first one, but the last one was a nice boat.
They were the first one was kind of interesting. There were 2 funny things about that. One was that it was, Chicago in the middle of the summertime, and it should have been beautiful weather, but it was kind of foggy. So we ended up just going around the canals in the town instead, which was actually quite nice. The other thing was that Jeff and I were almost late for the boat because we had to bring some audio-video equipment back to the hotel. And as we were like scrambling to get there, we were like, you know what? I think they would actually wait for us.
Well, if somebody noticed your absence.
That's cabs with everybody. It was small enough back then.
Yes, it was small. The boat reminds me. So 2 funny things about the boat from my perspective. So one, I was the only one, I think, under the age of 21, and the boat had alcohol. So the conference had to hire a security guard.
But how old was your beard?
Watch me. It was not. It was non-existent at the time. But maybe I'll shave this off, send it back in time, just glue it on.
The beard was a 400-year-old dragon at the time.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. We needed security just to check your ID.
Just right. Well, to make sure, not to check ID. Well, to check everybody's ID, but to make sure that since I wasn't of age to drink, I didn't drink. And then the funniest thing was I was just sitting there the entire time scrambling to get the debugger talk done because I hadn't done that. So I basically missed the entire thing, just like sitting at a table on the boat, writing that talk for the next day. It was a good experience, though. I don't regret it. But,
on this last year's boat, we're getting the most audience participation on the boat conversation of anything. Everybody is just agreeing that the boat was great. Elliot points out that he loved how we all were on this beautiful boat with beautiful views, and after about 15 minutes, we all started ignoring the beautiful sights to sit down to discuss GC strategies and whatever else funny things. Jacob says they were talking about conditional package loading, and yeah, I had the same experience, which is very funny.
I think there's a lot to be said for taking a group of intense people, putting them in a environment that's outside of their normal experience, and then the sort of mix of the surround, but them naturally falling back into their regular ways somehow still makes the whole experience sparkle. So yeah, the boat's
I wonder if we can have a boat on Galatine.
You should get a boat on the sea.
I have no idea how Galatine works, but
I'm going to start searching Zoom backgrounds so that I can
Zoom backgrounds for a boat.
Yeah.
Oh, we should find out. GatherTown is so nice, and the developers, I guess, are they're working with us for this event. So we can ask. I don't know. That would be nice.
The YouTube live chat asked if there will be a dance competition this year, and I do not believe it is scheduled.
Unfortunately,
I think there were not enough participants last year to make it a regular event.
It would be neat to set up a hackathon on Gather.town too. Like on Saturday, if people want to just hang out and hack, we could just go stand in the areas with the people you're working on, whatever you're working on, and then people could still kind of get that sense a little bit. You can wander around and ask what people are working on, and I think it actually achieves a lot of the same thing. Oh yeah, let's all go to the beach.
This is the closest I could find to a boat.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's pretty pleasant.
But yeah, we should. Yeah, I'll ask someone about that. It'd be nice to have a hackathon on Saturday.
Is that just a default Zoom background?
It is a default Zoom background. I have also this Zoom background that I use sometimes at work, which is just my apartment, from the exact same angle. But it's great because then I can take my computer with me to go to the kitchen and get some food, and nobody can really tell that I'm walking around the apartment and stuff because it's the exact same background.
That's really funny.
Sometimes I like to I think there's a tissue box there, so I can just reach over and pull a tissue from the ether. I think it's pretty funny.
That's excellent.
Not quite in the same spot. Yeah, I don't know.
I think my favorite Zoom background is the guy walking in on himself.
Oh, that's so funny. I haven't seen that one. That's really
all right.
funny.
Shall we briefly wrap up? I think maybe why don't we do a little bit of forward looking? What are we looking for to at JuliaCon or in Julia generally over the next couple of months? Things that are upcoming. I personally am working on a bunch of compiler stuff that I'm really excited to be able to show people. I think it'll be super cool. I think there's a bunch of long-standing AD stuff and other kinds of compiler transforms that are currently built on generated functions, which we talked about a little earlier, but should actually just have proper compiler support. So I'm working on that. It's not ready yet, but I find it super cool. So I'm looking forward to being able to show it to people. So what else are people looking forward to?
I'm going to be working on some task system efficiency. We need to get our scheduling overheads and latencies and everything way down, so that people can use threading for more kinds of things. So I find that fun. It's kind of going through and micro-optimizing everything. It's quite fun. And the tasks also need some work around error handling. I think I'll be looking. There's a few things that kind of need to be dusted off and tweaked.
How do you feel about this structured concurrency stuff? I haven't gotten a real read on your take on it, whether you think it's total BS or you think it's a good
and you're on air. So.
No, I mean it's not BS. I mean it's a good thing to do. I mean I think it's a really for when that pattern is applicable, I think that's a great thing to do, is to have a block where all of the tasks spawned within it exit by the end of it, which is basically what the @sync macro does, with a few semantic differences that I'm indifferent on. I'm happy to change those things. So yeah, I think it's a good thing to do. It's just I don't know if you always need to do it.
It seems like a lot of the sticking point is around how we handle task cancellation, which is like one of the important components in all of these structured concurrency things. And I think there's a couple different options, and it's not clear what the right option should be. Is that
task cancellation is really, really hard. Figuring out what that means and getting that to work properly is quite difficult. I know Jameson has strong opinions about that he doesn't really feel it's the right thing to do, that it's just not very reliable. So that's a big sticking point, I think.
I have a hard time
also getting signals routed to the appropriate task. I mean, the sort of Control-C canceling random, getting intercepted by random tasks.
Control-C is a big issue.
Yeah, that's control for fixing in Control-C. Yeah, that's another good thing to look at very soon. Yeah.
I can't tell if Jameson's dislike of cancellation is that it can't be done perfectly, so we shouldn't try to do it at all. Like I feel like that might be the perfect being the enemy of the good. Or
I think this might be a better discussion for the triage call at this point.
Yeah, we should probably.
This gets quite involved. Yeah.
I think our 1,000-person audience.
I'll say what I'm excited about. In 1.5, we've made the package protocol, which is a way of getting all the stuff you need to install packages. Instead of downloading it from GitHub and other random places, you download it from a set of servers that we control, which means we are responsible for keeping them up, but we can keep them up and we can make sure people get good service everywhere in the world. So we're making that the default, and that's been a huge amount of work. Elliot and I are giving a talk tomorrow. It's already pre-recorded, so it's weird. We already gave it, but we're giving it tomorrow from your perspective.
Elliot plugged that yesterday.
It's today from your perspective, because this is recorded in the past, and this video itself is playing on Wednesday.
Check the schedule. That's all I'm saying. Then I'm really excited about 1.6 because there's going to be a bunch of big package features, and then as far as I know, I can't think of anything else that I want to do. Big ticket items for the package manager. So there's like light at the end of the tunnel that I might be able to stop working on annoying package manager stuff for a while.
We'll be sure to file a bunch of issues real soon, right? Time to release another small goat herd from the queue, right?
Let me have my hope for a little while.
Yeah, I will. At least until tomorrow evening, right?
Until the end of JuliaCon, there's a moratorium on package issues.
That's right.
Tim, how about you?
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to enjoy it as a chance to get to know more about a field that I've not really participated in very much, but which is similar to the area you're working, Kano, which is the sort of whole, things that smell like automatic differentiation, et cetera. And I've started thinking a little bit about that, and looking forward to seeing what other people are doing and sharing stuff I've been playing around with. Sort of maybe, I guess, my main sort of interest is in going beyond the things that conventional optimization theory computes from functions as you evaluate things. So that's one I'm interested in. If we had a hackathon and I had lots of time, I think the Julia-focused, sort of general Julia-focused project I would be most interested in tackling, just because it feels sort of important and overdue, and that would be to see about really trying to speed up an interpreter by at least an order of magnitude or more. Just because I think if we could get the interpreter to the point that it has decent performance, I think that that could be useful in several contexts, not just making the debugger experience better, but also as a potential way of offloading some of the compile time latency stuff.
That would be fun. Yeah, and we should talk about it.
I would enjoy that, and also I think another area that would be interesting would be being able to switch between compiled mode and interpreted mode midstream. I think would have a lot of interesting implications for being able to solve the latency problem.
Yes. Yeah. mean, we've always talked about doing that, but it's not an easy problem.
I even have a stab at a PR that should at least help, but it's complicated enough that I've never had the time to finish it. So, yeah.
All right, I think that's another discussion.
Yes, exactly.
In a different venue, but we are actually also coming up on time for this podcast. So, any last plugs or wishes or anything? Otherwise, Nathan, do you want to outro us?
Thanks for coming. Consider yourself outroed.
Thanks, Nathan.
No, I don't know. I'll say thank you, everyone, for coming today. Thanks to our guests, who it was really great to have this conversation with the three of you. And thanks, Fonzie, for coming on and doing the hello segment. And please, anybody watching, we'd love to have you come do the same. Fill out the feedback form below. It's in the link in the description. We've had a bunch of great responses, and we'd love to keep getting more.
I think we're up to 30 responses now, actually, or 28 last I checked or something like that.
Yeah,
so.
I think so. And we've definitely been changing our content based on people's suggestions. So, please keep that up. We really appreciate that. And we'll see you around JuliaCon. And we'll see you on gather.town for proper interviews tomorrow.
Thanks again, Stefan,
so
Jeff,
sorry
and
for
Tim
those people
for taking the time to join us today.
But thank you guys for organizing this.
To see you.
Yep.
All
right. Take care.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. Bye.